Everybody has a bad night. And I think that was a weak debate performance. I don't think anyone in the campaign is disagreeing with that point. But I've been urging, and I expect that this will be moving forward, for the president to reassure folks in the media, the general public, the many editorialists, and others who've expressed concern by doing unscripted, casual engagements with journalists, with small groups of voters, a town hall, so that you can see what I've seen with our president in the last few months and, of course, the last few years. He is engaging. He is capable. He has an incredible record as president. I don't think you would dispute that, Jake. But the core question is whether what you saw in those few moments of the debate and over much of the arc of that 90-minute debate was someone having a difficult night or someone who is no longer up to the job. As he said on the stage in North Carolina, he wouldn't be running if he weren't confident he's up for the job.
So with all due respect, it is not honest to say that this is just one night. There have been moments like this that people have seen in front of the cameras and other moments with cameras not there. Just 2 weeks ago, let me just show this clip. There was another moment like this, not just a senior losing a train of thought, but something else going on. Here he is. It was in an event about immigration. He tries to introduce DHS Secretary Mayorkas, and there's some sort of glitch. I don't know what it is. Let's roll that tape.
Thanks to all the members of Congress and Homeland Security Secretary. I'm not sure I'm going to introduce you all the way. But all kidding aside, Secretary Mayorkas.
I don't know what that was.
That doesn't trouble me at all, Jake. Frankly, you can put up a dozen clips of me, of you, of anybody who's on TV, who speaks publicly all the time, losing their train of thought, misstating who they're about to introduce, not having a fluid moment. And if we're honest with each other, Jake, every time Donald Trump speaks in front of a rally, there's long stretches where he is saying nonsense, where he's talking about whether he'd rather be electrocuted or eaten by a shark, where he's saying nonsensical things about forests bursting into flame or windmills causing cancer. So to take that little clip and say, aha, Senator Coons, be honest. You know that our president is somehow mentally infirm, and yet to not put up dozens and dozens of much more alarming examples of the former president. Let me cut to the chase with what I think is a simple but important moment of testimony here, Jake. Only former President Trump has a vice president, secretary of defense, chief of staff, national security advisor who say he is not morally fit to be president and refuse to support him. The whole cabinet of our current president, the entire Senate in the Democratic caucus, every governor I know who already supports Joe Biden still supports Joe Biden, and we interact with him and work with him regularly. So do all of us who are in public life and speaking regularly have slips and moments where we don't finish our sentence properly or misidentify exactly who we're introducing? Absolutely. But I have been saying to the campaign senior leadership, our president needs to reassure folks by doing some unscripted, engaging public events soon. Otherwise, we're going to keep having this exact exchange until the cows come home and maybe until November, which I frankly think is a disservice to our country.
So, first of all, I don't think it's accurate to suggest that the news media hasn't provided or shown the American people clips of former President Trump saying odd or potentially distressing things. I think that we've been doing that since 2015. And obviously, we have also been covering many people who worked in the Trump administration who have not endorsed Donald Trump. If you want to talk about a candidate-to-candidate matchup, I understand. That's not really what I'm talking about. And I don't think it's fair to compare you or me losing our train of thought with whatever we saw on the debate stage on Thursday and that little clip from 2 weeks ago. But let me move on to one other question, because there is this question of what if? What if the Democratic Party decides to do something that you obviously don't think is wise? The Biden campaign wrote in an email this weekend that if President Biden were to drop out of the race, quote, we'd switch to candidates who would, according to polls, be less likely to win than Joe Biden, the only person ever to defeat Donald Trump, unquote. Then the email goes on to show polling from, to be honest, partisan pollsters that shows Vice President Harris, Governor Gavin Newsom, Pete Buttigieg, and how they match up. Now, to be frank, they're only 1 percentage point behind Joe Biden in those head-to-head matchups with Donald Trump. So it does not actually look as though there would be that much of a difference between the guy who has been president for 3+ years and has been spending tens, hundreds of millions of dollars running as a Democratic nominee and the people who haven't even been running.
What's your question, Jake?
How does that make your point? If you have Newsom, Buttigieg, and Harris are only 1 point worse than Biden in the head-to-head matchup, how is that like showing some sort of strength of President Biden?
Jake, I may be missing something. You're asking me to explain and defend an email that I didn't author or send out. Is your core question? Let me see if I can get a question.
Let me try again. Let me try again. I'll try again.
How would these other candidates?
No, the core
be
question
less competitive than
is,
Joe Biden?
because you reject the notion that there's actually anything going on beyond just a bad night or a bad moment here or there. Let me just ask you: do you truly think that President Biden is the strongest candidate to take on Donald Trump in November?
I think Joe Biden, two things, is the strongest, most accomplished president we've had in my lifetime.
Not the question.
That he's been counted out over and over and over. And he can go to the stage and say, here's my record. In my speech at the inauguration, said I would bring Congress together and we would address infrastructure and manufacturing, and we would reduce prescription drug prices, and we would invest in restoring our competitiveness as a country, and I would bring us out of the pandemic, and I would address the challenges that I inherited from Donald Trump, and he's done a magnificent job. He can say that. The other candidates, governors of different states and so forth, can't say that. His vice president can say she was a central part of that, and I do think that makes for an important argument. And this is the core thing I think you're trying to raise here, Jake. He needs to reassure folks with repeat performances in public that he is up to this task and address the core question you're asking me. I have not seen evidence that our president is not up to the task of running for and continuing to serve as president. So that's something that is up to our president to prove to the public in the coming weeks. And I'm accepting that as an open question and a challenge. But I do think he has the strongest record in his first 3 years that any of us could imagine. Just last month, our economy created more jobs, in no small part because of President Biden's leadership, than it did in the whole 4 years that Donald Trump was president. Joe Biden has the strongest record. We have the all-time high in the stock market, all-time low in unemployment. We have crime going down. We have investments in manufacturing going up. We are headed in a strong direction. And he's got a great platform to run for re-election. He is not the only Democrat who can run for president. That's not what I'm saying. Yeah, but he has the strongest record to run on.
I mean, he has given fewer press conferences, fewer interviews than any president in modern history, including the previous one, who's now running for re-election. And this could all be.
And the previous one told more lies per sentence than any candidate has ever told on a debate stage.
This is not the discussion that we're having. We could certainly, have that conversation. I certainly didn't particularly care for it when President Biden said no U.S. service members had been killed in the previous 4 years. But moving on from things that were said that were not true, I think it is easy to settle this right now by President Biden going to the Brady Press Center, the press file in the White House, and doing a 2-hour press conference. Everybody would cover it live. Networks probably would cover it live. He'd answer all these questions. It's not a crazy thing to expect a president to do. And the fact is, that the campaign knows that. The White House knows that. That's how you settle this. You just put him in front of reporters, and he handles himself with acuity, aplomb. We all see it was just a fluke. Oh, my God, I can't believe it happened, and we move on. The fact that you haven't done that says quite a bit to me.
Jake, what I've just said maybe 3 times in this interview is that is what I am urging and recommending. I think that the Biden family had a long scheduled family retreat at Camp David, where they had a family photograph taken and they were discussing both this debate and the summer and their plans. And I'm encouraging them to add something like that to the schedule, whether it's a 60 Minutes interview or something at the podium at the White House or a town hall. That's not up to me to decide, but that's what I've been encouraging our president to do.
Democratic Senator Chris Coons from the Small Wonder State, Delaware. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jake.